Well, you've heard a lot about journeys already this conference. I'm just here to tell you about my journey. Not just mine, but that of my wife, my entire family. When my wife, Sue, and I were much younger, we spent a lot of time talking about our shared interest, which was attempting to give health to those who did not have it in many places of the world. My expertise as an infectious disease doctor and hers as an intensive care nurse took us to a lot of places. We started in Asia, we were in Nepal, we were in the Philippines, India, Sri Lanka. Then we found ourselves in Eastern Europe and Latin America, and then finally Africa. I'm not a full-time missionary overseas. I'm a full-time missionary here. I practice medicine here in Houston, Texas. I've spent a lot of time in many committees and done a lot of things here in Houston, but I'm most interested in those things that will help people in even the remote regions of the world, and that is how we do it as our family. Initially, Sue and I would pack bags with medications, anything we could find, and take it to different places around the world to treat people in temporary clinics. That took us to the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Dominican Republic, and many other places. Sometimes we would see 200, 300, 600 people a day. The maximum we saw, we were limited to 900. Now, admittedly, maybe that's not the best way of assuring quality medical care, but I think that our interest and compassion was enough. Meanwhile, we had a life. We had a life here, and we raised a family. And therefore, sometimes I went by myself because Sue needed to stay back with the boys. Sometimes we could go together, and then sometimes we even took the boys with us. Our first trip as a family was to Nepal. We went to Kathmandu and Pokhara and surrounding regions. Andrew was almost 3, and Austin had not made his appearance yet because Sue was 6 months pregnant. I've told that to people, and they think Sue is crazy. But I guess I had something to do with that. Back when we were starting this journey, it didn't take us long to realize that in our own strength, we could not do everything. The magnitude of problems were just too great. Many arrived to the health systems with unbelievably advanced disease. Most lived in unsafe and unhealthy conditions. Treatable diseases were simply running rampant. Health stations were full of empty shelves. There was mismanagement of human waste. Many had unhealthy habits. Infrastructure was missing. People unknowingly contributed and propagated to the spread of disease. But the worst of all was the malnutrition. From an infectious disease standpoint, even if I had all the basic antibiotics and used them efficiently, even if we could afford to pay for the advanced antibiotics, the extended spectrum, 3rd and 4th generation cephalosporins, and extended spectrum penicillins, and the carbapenems, and even those new antibiotics, the Abacaz and the Zerbaxa, still, if a patient was malnourished, there would still be the same end result. If the host immunity was severely compromised by malnutrition, then there would be the same dismal outcome. This led me to identify the big 5 health problems of the developing world. Okay, as an infectious disease doctor, we have to have these things for us to remember. So I attributed these to the big 5 animals of Africa. These animals, as you know, are the hardest to hunt. So too are these big health problems. First off, mismanagement of human waste. It's like an elephant. Elephant, as you know, is a keystone species, one that has significant impact on other species and upon the environment beyond its mere numbers. Like the elephant, poor sanitation harbors, promotes, and magnifies disease. The second one is lack of clean water. That's like a camouflage leopard. Even water that may appear to be clean harbors microscopic pathogens that are not visible to the naked eye. You can't see them, but they're there. Number 3, inadequate education. It's like a rhino. A rhino, as you know, has a thick, impenetrable skin. The thick skin of tradition and bad habits is difficult to penetrate. But in order to have an impact, education must lead to adoption of healthy habits and a healthy lifestyle. Number 4 in the big 5 is inadequate resources. They're like the Cape buffalo. This is one of the most dangerous of all African animals. The lack of supplies, the lack of medication ties the hands of healthcare providers and leads to unnecessary death. But the biggest one, number 5, is the lion, malnutrition. Malnutrition makes every disease potentially deadly. In my experience and in the communities in which we have operated, the programs that have been most sustainable are those that address all these problems. This has caused us over the years to refine our efforts. We've gone from temporary clinics to distributing medication, and we have refined that. As an infectious disease physician working in these contexts, I've always been aware and interested in what Dr. Peter Hotez talked about this morning, which is neglected tropical disease, intestinal parasites. As you know, some intestinal parasites, specifically hookworm and strongyloides, enter the body through the bare feet or bare skin anywhere else. These, along with ascariasis, enterobius, trichuriasis, among others, are soil-transmitted helminthiasis, a neglected tropical disease. These infect an estimated 1 billion, and some even say 2 billion people worldwide. The parasites, as you know, live, grow, feed, and lay eggs in the intestines, and as they feed, not only do the parasites rob their host of nutrients which they don't have much of in the beginning, but they also impact health by contributing towards anemia, intestinal obstruction, stunted growth, and diminished intellectual capacity. Their eggs or larvae are passed in feces and into the environment. It's a totally vicious cycle. We began our fight against these parasites by helping different governments and different NGOs mass distribute albendazole. Because we were interested in measurable results, we here in the United States practice evidence-based medication as they do everywhere else in the world. But we're interested in actually seeing how our mass distribution has helped the people or has not helped. So we decided to start testing. So we went to Burundi and we tested 200 children. And of those 200, 64% of them had intestinal parasites. But the alarming thing was that this was just 1 month after they all received albendazole, after they all had mass treatment. Therefore, we knew that mass treatment alone was not the answer. So we looked around the environment and we decided that we needed to add some preventative measures. Initially, what we did is we gave them shoes. Most kids in Burundi and Uganda and other places where we work walk around barefoot, and that puts them at risk for different diseases. But as we began to use the shoes, we realized that they were not sustainable. They were too tedious, too expensive. They were ineffective. There's other ways that hookworm can enter the body. So we had to dig deeper to think for a better solution for prevention. As we looked, we noticed that pit latrines had a lot of flies. There was a lot of stink. There was a lot of other options for sanitation. So we introduced at that point compost-based sanitation and its many benefits. So here are the benefits. It provides an alternative to open defecation. Human waste is contained in this system to prevent exposure. It destroys pathogens through thermophilic decomposition. It prevents fecal contamination in of the soil and groundwater. It produces organic fertilizer. It fits into an agricultural society. It requires no infrastructure. There's no pipes. There's no flushing of water that they don't have enough of. It's replicable. It can be replicated using only local materials. It's inexpensive to build. It reduces transport of disease by flies. and decrease the risk of inherited diseases even when walking barefoot. Utilizing all that we had learned, we are now implementing a program targeting intestinal parasites in 2 rural communities. One is in Uganda, and one is in Burundi. Because of the design, other pathogens, other than the parasites, are affected, such as cholera, typhoid, and others. In order for the program to be successful, we have to pick the right place. So the first thing we do is we choose a community with certain criteria, like a community that is rural, a community that has a lot of poverty, a community that has poor sanitation infrastructure like water sourcing and like waste management, and also a place where the health standards are not up to what anyone wants to be. The second thing we do is we do testing. We do a rapid appraisal. We test 200 children for intestinal parasites. Also, we check their hemoglobin, checking for anemia. We check HIV testing and malaria, both of which can cause anemia also. And we check for height and weight to assess their nutrition. And then we do give mass treatment with albendazole, vitamin A. We also introduce compost-based sanitation. And we also provide education to augment the education that they already have. And then, on a yearly basis, we repeat the rapid appraisal. And then we assess, depending upon the results of this yearly rapid appraisal, what other preventive measures we should do. In rural Uganda, which we started the program a little bit over a year ago, we noticed initially there was a 74% incidence or prevalence of intestinal parasites. After 1 year, which is October 2016, that had decreased to 50%. Then a few months ago, as I've talked to you previously, we decided to attack another problem. We purchased the 50-acre plot. It's located along the Muda River. That's the border between Congo and Uganda. And in this plot, we're beginning to plant nutritional products. We're beginning to teach the locals how to grow these products. The land was cleared last month, and we begin planting this month. We're hoping that we can employ some people. We're hoping we have cash crops to sell to big companies in Kampala. And we also are planning to support a feeding program in the schools and communities throughout the region. I'm tired of seeing malnourished kids. Our work has been noticed by the local community. Now we have relationships that we have developed, and these are ones that we endear and trust with our cooperation. We expect these relationships to be the key to allow our intervention in other much-needed health-related programs. Now, I want you to remember a story in the Bible about Jesus feeding the 5,000. As you recall, Jesus and the disciples went to a desert place so that they could pray together and commune together. But the people were so desperate, they beat them there. There was 5,000 men, not including the women and children. So Jesus had compassion upon them and began to teach them. Well, as the day progressed, it became late, and the disciples recognized there was a problem. They didn't have any food, they didn't have a place for them to stay. So Jesus, they said, Jesus, please send them away that they might find sustenance and shelter. Jesus, I said, the people are not only hungry, they're thirsty, they're sick, they don't have enough medications. Send someone who can help them take care of all the problems. Notice that the disciples and I not only recognized the problem, but we came up with a solution, which made a lot of sense to us. But Jesus did not take the solution in hand. He did not take the advice of the disciples, nor did he take my advice. Jesus said, you give them something to eat. The disciples were dumbfounded. One of them said it would take a small fortune to feed them all. Another said, there's a little boy, he has a few loaves and a couple of fish, but what is that among so many? I said, I cannot feed them all. I cannot treat them all. Then I thought, I added, But I do have a suitcase. I have a few medications. But what is that among so many? Jesus said, give me what you have. Give me the loaves and the fishes. Give me the suitcase. But especially, give me that which you have that you think is totally inadequate. So, as the story goes, Jesus took what they had, he looked up to heaven, and he blessed it. And he told them to have the people sit in groups. And he instructed the disciples to give them to eat. And he told us to give them what medicines they needed. And as the story goes on, all were fed to their full. And when they gathered up the scraps, there were 12 baskets full. Who would have thought that one suitcase of medications would evolve into opportunities for us, someone who's still practicing medicine in the United States, to impact entire communities, to have strangers become our friends, to impact regions of the entire earth. So, brothers and sisters, say yes to this. Feed the hungry. Give drink to those who thirst. To the strangers, take them in so they can no longer be called strangers anymore. Give clothes to the naked. And if they're sick or they're in prison, go be with them.